Okay, that's a good start. It is Curse of the Zoom. It doesn't work.
All I wanna do is zoom a zoom zoom zoom.
What? How are you guys getting on? How you doing, Himanshu, chat? Any fun your side of the world?
Yeah, doing well. It's very sunny today, so that's good.
It's rainy. We had no monsoon last year, and it's been like crazy this year. Raining and flooding and raining and flooding.
That's wild. Do you know they released an article today in the news here in Ireland that really unsettled quite a few people, which is the list or map of all of the cities and towns that are going to be underwater by 2040 as like a rough prediction. And even though it's like a guesstimate at best, the all of my friends are up in arms. Like, we're going to be underwater. We have to sell and move today.
That's interesting because I just read an article about how Ireland was one of the better positioned uh, pieces of land for the future of our Earth and population because they were like Australia, UK, Ireland, and like basically these islands that would be more resilient to the rising sea levels and also sustainable for like agriculture and things like that.
I don't know. Sounds like we just have a few more years before the entire Earth just spontaneously combusts or something.
It's quite depressing, but I feel the same way. Like I don't this we are outpacing the projections and it's just getting worse.
Like, if you look at that photo there, so this is the prediction for 2040. So all of the red areas are supposedly going to be underwater, and we're talking like a couple of feet of water as well. And so my parents' house is just smack dab in the middle there in Raheny, but like Baldoyle, Portmarnock, that's where I used to go to school. All of this place apparently just completely underwater.
This is likely the right Zoom room.
Y'all got into
Um,
the other one? Didn't even let me in.
Well,
I
I think I
I went
think
too quick.
Enrique and I probably visited a Slack message before Eric edited it or updated it.
Mhm.
We were just sitting in one room by ourselves. So.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
and
wouldn't even let me
I
in.
had
It
just
just
left
failed.
it. I had just left it. So I just copied the wrong link from the wrong invite. I'm bad at calendars if anybody hasn't figured that out. There's Enrique. Sorry everybody for the confusion. I swear. I think we're just going to have to delete this invite and start it from scratch. It feels like it reverts every time.
Yeah, that's no
But it's
problem.
recording.
Yeah,
It's
it's a good
recording.
start. Yeah. It did.
It's we're doing the automated recording part, right? Let's see. We got I think we got everybody that's going to make it. Dennis may or may not make it. Is that the case?
I think Dennis probably won't make it. He's finishing up a lot of
Yeah.
personal OKRs at the minute.
Yep. And friends out. So I think we got everybody today, which is cool. This is a good group. I'm just dropping one more note. I don't know if you want to run through the EM updates first, David. I'll make my notes.
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, so the say-do ratio 70% throughout the month of July, which is really good. Our general ballpark for our OKR and create is between 70 and 80. So we're managing to do the things we say we're going to do without overcommitting, which is the sweet spot to be in. Narrow MR rate is 9.125 or 9 if you round down, which is in line of the goal for create, which is between 8 and 10 again. So the sweet spot. And our OKRs for Q3, they're in progress. I don't have any super meaningful updates about them just yet because we're still pretty close to the beginning of the quarter. But by the next monthly meeting, we'll have some updates on them. Anybody have any questions about the Q3 OKRs or anything like that? All right, super stuff. The only other thing is, but I'm assuming everybody's already aware, is the 360 reports, the 360 feedback reports coming up over the next month. So if you encounter any problems, feel free to reach out to me or reach out directly to People Apps.
I did learn with the 360 reports that if you submit reviewers, or I guess they're not reviewers, maybe they are reviewers. If you submit reviewers and you can't go back and edit it, but David can. So, yeah. It's not too late for a little gerrymandering. Is that the right term?
Only if one of your reviewers is named Jerry.
I think it's Jerry rigging, is it? But I like your one better, to be honest.
What is it? What is it actually? Jerry
rigging? Is it not? I thought
Oh.
you could jerry rig something.
Gerrymandering is the manipulation of voting districts to influence the result of an election
by like drawing boundaries around
Yeah.
populations and stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, David's the guy for 360 gerrymandering.
It's no man.
Jerry rigging maybe has the same root, but I don't know for sure. Somebody named Jerry with a G
It's not the same
was
root,
very
but-
tricky back in. It's not the same root.
No, but we can go on.
Okay, well, I always say that I'm gonna go quick and then I talk for an hour and a half on everything in my agenda, but I don't actually want to spend a ton of time. I'd like to leave it open for Q&A and discussion. But the strategic product update section, I did want to share, if you didn't see it, which you might not have because I didn't post it in our room, we have a new group direction page. And this is not something we've had before. We had all our category direction pages, but as an experiment within the dev section PMs that we were talking about whether or not this would be valuable and what form it should take. And group direction pages for a lot of teams is potentially repetitive information with their category directions, and they're trying to talk about how to automate it. But I volunteered us because I thought a group direction page would be actually very beneficial to us. A lot of this information I had in our HQ epic, which is like what we're working on and why. I thought it'd be great to surface this in a sort of executive summary form about these are the categories we own. This is where they're at, links to their direction pages, and just like one or two sentences about what we're working on and why, where we're spending our time, and then links to it's a landing page of sorts for how to get around relevant direction information. I'm hopeful that this will have two outcomes. One, it will make it much more clear for anybody asking what's the editor group working on and why, right? Like sales, execs, anybody who isn't in the weeds with our group might say, what's going on with snippets? Why isn't there much traction there? Like, or I haven't seen a new snippets feature in a while. Don't we have a snippets team, right? Like that's a fair question. But obviously if they had all the context here, they'd know that we're not spending a ton of time on snippets right now because we have these other categories. It also, afterwards, I realized in talking with David could help us with discussions around hiring and growing the team. So as we show the categories that we own, which ones we're not working on, we might be able to make a case for, hey, you want some improvements to snippets? Well, we're either taking time away from this or we're getting more people. So hopefully it makes these kinds of conversations easier, and I will do my best to keep it up to date. The next step is to go through and update our individual category direction pages, which has been on my plate for, I don't know, 4 months, and I need to go back and do that. I also created direction pages for the source editor and content editor that are mostly placeholder now, and I need to flesh those out. So I have a lot of writing in my future, but this is the beginning of it, and hopefully it's helpful to everybody. Keep an eye on there. If you see any errors, please either change it and ping me in the MR, or just let me know and I'll make a change. Any questions on the group direction page? Or, I mean, hopefully it's pretty straightforward. It shouldn't be a surprise, the information either. Hopefully, like you knew what we were working on already, and you knew that we weren't putting much time into some of these categories. The biggest change here, this was also a way to communicate the shift in our focus away from navigation and settings. So I can put it on paper and say, like, look, we're returning our focus to our other categories. And yeah, that was another strategic timing related thing with why I wanted to write this page. So speaking of categories, let's talk about web ID and source editor.
Can I ask you a question about the direction page?
No, time's up for that.
Oh, gosh, I know. You kept saying it, and I was like, maybe I should take a look at it. And then I saw it, and you already moved on. I'm joking. I'm sorry. But can you dive into like how one may interpret these percentages on the page? It says like what we are working on and why. And one question it comes up to is like, there's no time value to those percentages. So, and I know it's just kind of fuzzy. I just want to get your thoughts on like, how do you feel the interpretation of these percentages are?
Yeah, that is a good question. And it is not an exact science. And I certainly, I actually loathe the breaking up of individual people's times and saying like, you're going to spend 40% of your time on this and 60% of your time on that. This is more as like in capacity planning, road mapping, and it is fuzzy and they're approximate. So like, as I'm thinking about what work goes into a milestone, I'm saying like, maybe we can fit one snippets issue or like one bug related to snippets in. Maybe we can put 2 or 3 people on content editor. Maybe we can put most of our time into web ID and source editor this month. And then like maybe one milestone, it skews heavier towards settings and app because we find a bug or there's like one thing we want to fix. But these are approximations of how we're planning milestones and not necessarily like, oh, we've got 6 engineers and 40% of them need to be working on this every milestone. So that's a good question and a good distinction.
They almost, and correct me if you vibe with this, but I almost see them as like prioritization weights rather than like percent of focus. I guess when new work comes in, this is the weight of that kind of work that add to it for prioritization.
I like that, and it's possible. Well, first of all, it was very stressful for me to try and make these add up to 100%, like making sure that I didn't say we're working on 120% of our time, or and there are ranges on here, so there is flexibility. I like that approach. I'll think about breaking it out into like top tier focus, like secondary focus, and like back burner. I just hesitated to say. I hesitate on the category pages and I hesitate on here saying like, we are specifically not focusing on this. Live preview is the only one that has an absolute 0. I guess static site editor does too. But in a way, because of content editor, we are working on something that could benefit that depending on where we head with it. So I'll think about that. It's good feedback.
Chad, is that a XP thing where like you only have so many priority points and you have to like, you're raising your eyebrow like I'm wrong, and I probably am, but I feel like there's I've read some
I
sort of
mean,
agile practice of like,
when you said the work coming in, like there's bugs, right? There's stuff that comes in from external, but then Eric makes up stuff for us to do. Not that he makes it up, but he devotes his effort to plan
just
what we
just
need to
keep
do.
yourself busy.
And these percentages also reflect where he and Michael and the rest of the product team devote their effort in deciding what we want to do, which comes from them based on customer demand, but it's not like all external. But to answer
yeah,
your question, it's like once they decide what we're going to do and it's pretty well set up, then the team waits it. But as far as the focus, that's sort of outside and above the specific
yeah.
day-to-day
So
planning and waiting.
what I'm remembering in my head, apart from how we do software development lifecycle here and the XP stuff that we've been talking about, this like requirements prioritization is like at the requirements, like at the not necessarily, at the iteration level. It's kind of more at the like we're talking to the customer, trying to get here's all the things you want, but you can only pick 5 that we're going to really top prioritize. And I know that there's processes for it that are like just for doing the requirements prioritization. I just don't remember what they may be called or whatever.
Well, that's more like lean product management is how we do a lot of it. And when Michael and the other designers do all of the interviews and assessments and stuff and usability studies, like that's what flows into a lot of this. And correct me if I'm wrong, Eric.
No, you're right. We have I was looking at prioritization. We have like a documented prioritization model.
There's the
with like,
product workflow too.
yeah, it's in the product page, but it's quite a long page. So I'm trying to find. Yeah, I'm trying. There's 38 mentions of prioritization. So.
Well, just to clarify, I think it's really cool. I think it's cool that it all adds up to 100% because I know that constraint is hard, but those constraints help us make decisions because you have to prioritize. I think I really like the intention and what's behind here is really good. So thanks for letting me dive into it.
Yeah, well, and ultimately the percentages, raw numbers are easier to parse for certain stakeholders and just like glance at. And so there's also the risk, and I fall in this trap all the time, like when you have more than one top priority, right? Like it starts to get fuzzy also. So when you have 3 things that are your top priority, it's not really your top priority. So anyway, I'll keep that feedback in mind. This is a sort of pilot. There's another group working on a group direction page, and then there's other groups outside of dev that have already started, like naturally started working this way and use only a group direction page. I don't think we're going to get away with that yet, but this is a work in progress. Feedback is welcome, and I'll keep that in mind.
So just the final note on your question, Paul, like if you look on the product development workflow page that I sent that GitLab uses, the validation track is sort of what we were talking about. That's all in Eric and the designers. Like, what are we going to do and how do we validate that and get it very clearly defined? And then the build track would be more of the XP where the team comes in and says, okay, what's the weight of this and how are we going to execute on it? This needs to be broken up more. Go back to the validation track. That sort of, I would see an XP process sort of layering on top of what GitLab has documented here.
That makes sense. Yeah, thanks for the education, everybody.
Now specifically on the web ID and source editor, we haven't come together as a group to talk about the shift towards SaaS reliability, but we've talked about it a bunch async, and I really appreciate all your input in those epics. And I was going to link them, but then I started talking. So they're in the web IDE and wiki category strategy epics for improving reliability and over the course of this quarter. It seems pretty clear that we have some work that we should do and can do to improve reliability of our categories. It sounds like right now we're rallying around two main things for the Web IDE: the state refactor, which is long overdue, and I'm very excited that we're getting a chance to do it, and potentially moving to GraphQL for the requests and improving performance and reliability there. I'm going to leave sequencing those up to the experts, and my only ask is that we take the next couple weeks to refine the epics and make sure the issues are weighted and we have a sense of a plan. But other than that, I'm very excited about the work there. That's what we'll be doing for the next, I don't know how many milestones, but probably 2 to 3. You tell me if that's not enough time and we'll work on it. In a little bit of a longer term view on the Web ID, the commit flow is still very interesting to me, and Michael has some really interesting ideas around how we can standardize that across the different places that use source editor. And the that kind of plays a little bit into a discussion that we were having during the backlog refinement session related to read-only views of the Web IDE and like what you can do to code when you are like viewing a repository where you don't have write access, or if you present options to fork instead of commit, or create patches and things like that. That stuff is still of high interest. And then maybe a little longer term, we need to validate this a little more and work on design. But I think it's probably really good to bring in the MR discussions into the Web IDE. That's probably more of like a first part of next year focus or something. So we don't need to rush on that. We need some design and validation work, but I think that'll be our next big thing. That's not work specifically related to source editor. I do want to highlight that Dennis has wrapped up work on the Markdown preview, which I'm very excited to
wrapped
get in
up
there.
is a bit of an overestimation, obviously.
Well, if it's working, it's wrapped up, right?
It's in review for just to set the expectation bar correctly here. The merge request currently in review is for live preview for the blobs. I have the patch to make it work in Web ID, and maybe after the first round of review, maybe I will just push that to the same merge request, and then we'll have the live preview in Web ID as well. But awesome. It's not anything magical there. We'll have to come back to this and refactor the architecture of it at some point anyway, because now it's a bit too heavy on the server.
We know all about heavy-handedness of Markdown rendering on the server, so that's a theme.
That I was considering routing this through Prose Mirror through the great work that Enrique and Himanshu work on to do this to do this client side. But the problem is that that would take time, and this would not generate the exact preview that users will get afterwards when they save the page anyway. So that's why I decided to take the baby steps, and now we are just fetching the preview from the server to make things consistent.
That sounds like the right call and a good iteration, but I think we should continue that conversation about how we can just make that round trip even more efficient and use the work that we're doing on the content editor. I think that's great. The other thing in relation to the MR discussions and stuff, I think we'd want to focus on source editor and building and maturing the extension so that things like merge requests discussions can be added in a performant and efficient manner. And so those will work in parallel, and we can plan that out. Again, it's not like immediate work next milestone, but we should start thinking about it and talking about it soon. I know I said this like probably a month ago, but we'll set up a Think Big session for the Web IDE soon. Maybe after our team building meeting, and Dennis, when you're back from PTO, so that you can join. So we'll get it on the calendar and find a time that's right for everybody. But I'd really like to just get all these ideas out there too. I was being a little flippant with the content editor, all the things, but really the discussion there is that we set an ambitious goal in Q3 with only just like slightly getting just a little bit of permission from Enrique and Himanshu to push this, but we're trying to get support for GitLab flavored Markdown in the content editor. There's some aspects of GitLab flavored Markdown that we can't parse that just need custom renderers, and we're trying to get it all done in the next couple milestones. So I created an epic yesterday, and we're trying to really figure out what's essential. And this is I finally found it, so I'm going to put it here. This is the epic that we'll kind of use to track rendering of GitLab flavored Markdown. I'm very excited by what I saw at the end of the day yesterday. Is Enrique posted a comment to me in an issue where he created a tutorial for rendering, for creating an extension to render emojis, and I'm excited to follow through it and see if I can even pick off like the easiest thing on this list and try and help out. But don't get your hopes up. I'm probably not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, that looks great. I'm looking forward to reviewing it today. That's a good idea. I was just going to do emojis, but I should do something real, and then it's done.
If every one of us like take one extension, like we will be finishing this milestone. Very easy.
So, but seriously, my only concern when I saw that was we talked about rewriting the way the tests work. So I feel a little bit bad that the more we do, the more of the golden master tests will have to migrate, but that's not a big deal. It just means we should do that sooner than later.
Well, I hope that we don't like they afford to rewrite the golden master test. It's not, like directly related to the amount of extensions that we have implemented. I would expect like it's just like one single import for that specific file.
Yeah, we can run them in parallel. We can definitely talk about it.
So I would love some input on this issue, this epic in particular. This is also an interesting one because I'm going to try out our automation with our new OKR tracking tool, and which requires a checklist in the epic description. It's very like specific how we have to set it up, but I'm trying to create a checklist that's almost an iteration plan to get to the point where we can make the content editor the default Markdown editor for a small portion of the population. We don't need to make it for everybody, but maybe like our group or GitLab and team members or something like that, just to set a bar for ourselves. So creating the GM test spec is the first checkbox on that list, and that issue is part of this epic. I'm trying to get just the bare minimum number of rendering issues that will make it so that we don't have any data loss or data corruption, bringing in existing wiki pages. I think the biggest one that's missing on this list is wiki specific Markdown. So I moved it under the next section. So things like being able to create links in the wiki automatically. I don't know how content editor is going to parse that. We can discuss that async, but let's tighten up this list, and then I'll connect it to Ally, and we can just have a plan and start checking things off as they get done. I think it'll be a great place to consolidate our focus for the next couple milestones.
Paul, about your question of how community friendly are these issues. So we are trying to do, like in my case, I'm trying to write a tutorial to make easy to pick up, like, extensions are easy to implement. Even we have like parts of the source code, like we have this picture where you paste, you copy HTML in an issue and you get Markdown. So that's also based on Prosmeter, and it has an schema. So we can use some of that code as an example. We could also like record a pairing session and just implement another simple extension and share that YouTube link as an example for a wider community. So I think that we discussed last week that we could submit some of those issues for the next hackathon. And all of those resources could be helpful to encourage people.
I think that's a great idea. I think spending just a little bit of time so that we can crowdsource it effectively could help it so that our team isn't necessarily the only people implementing all this would be really cool. Even people outside of our group that are GitLab engineers too might be interested in contributing to outside things as well. With that, looking at all of these issues and some crazy idea, is it because these are almost all like just pure functions. It's like, hey, given this, we expect this output or whatever. Like, is it possible that we could even just create like the test case? Like, we know this is solved if this is the test case that would, like, if this passes, like almost a test driven development issue, but very not strict. Do you think that would make it more friendly too, or?
Yeah, that's very related to what Chad was talking about, the golden master test. We implemented an initial version with his help, where we just like add a test case in a markdown, in a YAML file with the markdown example. But that's like very easy as well. Like in the tutorial, that's the way that the tutorial starts, with a failing test, where we just set the example and then we implement the extension.
Cool,
I think
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's one really important question here. The direction that we had talked about for the new Golden Master specs, which also asserts that the backend GitLab flavor markdown never changes without being intentional. We were going to write those as request specs, which implies having Ruby set up and maybe not the whole GDK, but at least the backend setup, which increases the barrier for people to be able to help with this. We don't need to discuss it here, but that's definitely something to think about. But I do have a concern. Or maybe that means we just defer that until they're all written, right? To keep the barrier low for all of these contributors, and you don't have to rewrite this tutorial, so it can all still be on the front end, but then we defer that rewrite later. I like that idea.
If the tests, though, like, so also considered not all contributors can even get a running GDK. So
that's what I'm saying.
Right. And if that helps with that, that sounds awesome. Yeah.
Let's talk more about that, Eric. Maybe I think that's a reason to defer doing that. Because the biggest benefit of that is like locking down the regression on both sides. The backend never changes unless the front end changes at the same time, but that's not necessarily urgent right now because we don't change GitLab flavor markdown that often.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, let's keep that discussion going. There's an issue now for the for creating that spec, and you assigned yourself to it, Chad. So we can.
I was going to jump on it, but it's not like I don't have lots of other things to do. So that was my first thought when I read this, Enrique. I was like, oh man, we're going to have to rewrite this when we rewrite the specs, and.
That's okay. Our documentation is alive. We have to constantly change it, and the content editor changes all the time as well. So it's a constant import.
So I didn't write about longer term for the content editor, but I think Himanshu brought up the point in discussing this OKR, like we need to wrap this around business goals. So I just wanted to share, I think I shared this with David and Michael in a sync meeting. So I wanted to just summarize it here. As far as business goals for the content editor, where I would like to, how I would like to sequence things is, we're here right now. We have like a beta version in the wiki. I would like to get to the point where we can make it the default markdown editor in the wiki, meaning we have full support for GFM. There's no data loss, and then we can start refining the UX and building custom editing tools. At a certain point, that would also mean persisting the user's preference for using it. At a certain point, then we would remove the preference. So that might be 6 milestones from now. It might be 10 milestones from now. At some point in the future, we'll remove the classic editor and go only content editor in the wiki for Markdown. That would be the next business goal, is to make it the exclusive Markdown editor. And then possibly in parallel, depending on how ready Plan is to work with us on this, but the next business goal there is to start using content editor elsewhere. Markdown is written, which most likely would mean the issue and epic descriptions, putting that behind a feature flag, getting some help from Plan and implementing that, and trying to figure out what gotchas are there would be the next business goal. And then flipping that to be the primary way people write issues would be our another business goal, another milestone we want to achieve.
Can I interject with a related question, which is not this question about me asking the question? Is the long-term goal user opens up to create an issue, and now we have the content editor where they're editing a WYSIWYG immediately?
Yes. Yeah, I think that would be
anticipating user pushback to change. Perhaps we should, is it how we talked about budgeting this as a user preference of which one they want to edit, either just raw Markdown or the content editor?
Yes, I have thought about that. I should have said at a certain point in there too, we need to tighten up the relationship between content editor and source editor. A source editor as our raw viewer, our raw editor, and content editor as our WYSIWYG editor, and be able to switch between those two is critical. We've seen that feedback already with the wiki. Like, some people say, this is great, but I don't want it, right? That's fine. We don't want to force anybody to use this. I don't think the content editor I should have clarified. It's not the exclusive way to edit Markdown content. It's just that we don't maintain the existing classic editor anymore. And instead we would use content editor, which hopefully also has a mode that shows just raw Markdown and lets you edit that way. The challenge here with issues is that the issue editor also has all those extra extensions, like the picker for issues and emojis and stuff like that. So I guess the conversation then starts to be like, can we get those into source editor, or are they maintaining yet another branch of an editor that needs to coexist? So all great conversations to bring up. Surfacing as a user preference, it probably should be. I try to avoid preferences, but it probably is something that we would need to store.
Okay. I know, as I was thinking about it growing, I would trip over myself a whole lot, because if I'm not in Vim world, I start typing Vim commands in non-Vim windows. If I'm not in Markdown world, I start typing Markdown. So I know that other users, if we all of a sudden change it on them, would run into the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our ideal state is that if you have muscle memory and you're typing in the way that you typed in the old editor, the content editor should accept that. And just
That's right, it does.
Make it
That's
prettier, right? And just make it nicer looking.
That's a true.
That is the concession that I'm hoping we're making. But there still is a percentage of our audience that is going to be like, I don't want you to style it for me. I want to see it in this way because I like looking at the matrix, right? Like, it's how I think, which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. So I think we should keep that in mind as a fallback. And
I even write Markdown when I'm just using pencil and paper. Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. That I would like to see you write a Markdown table on a notepad, right?
There should be someone out there that is saying like, oh, I love writing Markdown tables. I just need to put all of those characters.
that one person can honestly go use a different tool. I do not ever want to write another Markdown table. HTML tables, sure. Like, you want to write all your opening tags. Markdown tables are a mess. I'm glad this is being recorded. I hope we put it on YouTube. I want everybody who maintains Markdown to understand how messy those tables are. I can't. But yes, I think these are all great questions, and I don't want my enthusiasm over a WYSIWYG interface to be taken as a distaste or lack of commitment to making the raw source available. And it's important to keep that in mind.
I think
It's also why we chose not to do a proprietary file format on the back end.
Yeah, I think what we can do is we can have a toggle button that lets you edit in Markdown editor or in content editor. Yeah, that would be a great way. So we don't have to have a setting that is hidden in the settings section. We can just have a setting, sort of a button that's always there. But yeah, that reduces the room for all the other buttons in the toolbar. Yeah, that's one point. And the other point is that I don't think we should be using source editor for rendering plain text, because right now all we have is a text area, and the text area is very accessible. But we'll have a lot of other problems with source editor unless we can create a bundle that is like trimmed down and that only has the necessary stuff that is needed to render Markdown.
Yeah, I think there's an issue that's just like technical exploration on using an instance of source editor. The two places we've considered using it are rendering code blocks and using it to edit raw source. So I think in the technical exploration there, we can rule it out or decide how it needs to change in order to make it more flexible or more performant or whatever the concerns are. I use it as a shorthand because it's how I think about editing code in the context of our group. But yeah, I think we do need a discussion and a technical plan to make that a reality.
Just to give some background, we had the dedicated session with the source code group earlier today regarding exactly this this topic, because they were the moving force behind using source editor for rendering the blobs, and they already have it implemented behind the feature flag. Then another group has it for their needs. I don't remember exactly. It's in the security stage, or not stage, but whatever it is. Like, I don't know. Is it stage security? It's not stage, right? It's just global thing. Okay.
It's a secure group.
Yeah, secure. But they have groups there as well. So it's kind of like, I don't know. Okay, whatever. They use it as well. And using the conversation we had on Slack, I've voiced over all the concerns that have been raised during the Slack conversation by Himanshu, but by Paul, by Chad. So all of the potential issues of using source editor have been voiced, and what the source code group will do is still not 100% no, but there are possibilities to use Monaco. Still, there is the merge request where we can have a component that technically gives us all the functionality of the highlight JS that you, Himanshu, advocate for, with the exception of much smaller scope of supported languages. But when we say use source editor for rendering the view files, it might not necessarily mean pulling in the whole editor, but just use some parts that provided by Monaco for that purpose, and that's very lightweight. What solution source code will end up with is still unknown, because we still have to run a lot of tests, performance tests, to figure out the most performant solution. But that shouldn't really block our discussions of because we have our use cases for rendering the code snippets, code blocks anyway.
That's awesome.
Dennis,
Thanks for that update.
I have a question about how we can use components of Monaco. Does Monaco allow that kind of access in its API, like just like stripping out the editor?
First of all, using the Webpack plugin with the recent versions of Monaco, we can create the custom chunk, custom bundle of trained down Monaco. That will be more or less lightweight. Also, when I say the component, I didn't mean the component of Monaco, but I meant just sort of the view component that abstracts everything and does the things. I can paste the link to the MAR so that we understand what this is about. The MAR is the, let me just copy paste this. So here's the URL. So the that MR provides the view component that we can use technically anywhere in the product with to show the code blocks that are not server-side generated, that not go through Rouge. Like we just take the string as the input for the code block and pass it down to this component, and it's going to use it's going to be formatted and highlighted, but using not Rouge but Monaco.
Thanks for the link. What is that noise, by the way?
Somebody has phone way too close to the microphone.
Someone's playing with some sine waves and envelopes.
I thought somebody was playing with theremin. Okay. The last thing that's on the agenda, settings and navigation, and I wrote none of the things. With the focus on reliability, I had planned loosely to address some of the feedback on settings and navigation over the coming milestones. We're likely not going to return to that in the immediate future. So you can put that out of your mind for now, hopefully focusing on the things we just talked about. And yeah, we'll see how that goes in the next quarter or so. Oh, yeah, live transcription. Thank you, Himanshu. We should do that more often. Except I didn't get your name. Okay, open Q&A. Any other questions? Hit me with the hard questions.
How's it going?
Doing good. My son started playing Pokemon Go, so now we're addicted to it. It gets us outside.
Can you play in the car, like while you're driving? Can you catch them all?
If you're quick, but it tells you, it knows that you're driving because the GPS is going too fast, and it gives you a warning so that you shouldn't be playing it while you're driving. But a passenger can play it.
Got it. Okay.
It won't shut
I tried
down.
doing that. When the game started, like I tried doing that. And the other problem is that there are a lot of people and drivers complaining with me about it.
Maybe.
Some drive-bys. Cool.
On our group channel, I've pasted the link to the video of today's session with source code regarding source editor for viewing the blobs. So if you would like to chime in and comment on that, feel free.
Trying
All right.
to go back and summarize that discussion, but if anybody else has any details to add to the discussion about the source editor, using it in the content editor, or using it in source codes repository view, feel free. We'll obviously post the recording too. Any other tough questions you want to ask in sync, or we could give people, oh, I guess we're at time. So never mind. I'll close the agenda. Always available for questions though, async. Don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
Adios.
Thanks everyone.
Hasta luego.
Have a good one. Take care.